I'm gonna keep the sports references limited, but if you want, a simile, look at what Tampa Bay is doing with Tom Brady. Uh,
Yes.
Nobody thinks that Tom Brady can win it all for them anymore. We don't think that Joe Biden is necessarily the strongest candidate out there, but damn, man, they're surrounding Brady with like
Surround him with
all of the
talent.
talent.
TheKidsWearCrowns.com.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into a sort of special, brand new episode of Don't Call This a Podcast. I feel like I say this every time we do a new episode. We've been pretty inconsistent lately. I don't think we've strung out like episodes in a row since last June. It's almost been a year. But we are trying to do something a little bit different here. As I mentioned on the intro to this, if you are listening to the audio version, we are going to switch up for season 5 and kind of do a little special episode. As I've gotten older and more boring, and Ron probably the same. I've really been absorbed into the way politics works, the things that are happening, not just because of, political system, it's kind of interesting to study, but, there are dire consequences to everything that happens. And the better we can get to be more educated about these things, then the better we can do to, get people involved in making the right decisions. I will also say, as I've mentioned before, and it's again incredibly boring because of my graduate program and my master's and my thesis and my deep dive into history that I had not done before. Of course, you know these things, but you don't really know them until you study them. I've really become invested in why politics plays such a crucial role. So that's my boring holdover and spiel. Let me go ahead and let Ron introduce himself for the people that don't recall from 2 episodes ago, which was now 4 months ago, who he is. So Ron, by all means.
So yes, I'm Ron. I guess you could call me the official founder of Kids Wear Crowns, even though I feel like this idea was kind of workshopped amongst all of us. Ryan had a bit, AJ had a bit to play in it. But yeah, I know you don't get to see me much, but I'm pretty excited about this new series, although it's not a time in American history for much excitement right now. But I do think there needs to be a platform to discuss things like this. And I'm glad Ryan had this idea so we can share our perspective on these issues. So yeah, glad to do this.
Yeah, so just to kind of parse of where this came from, there's a lot going on, as you all know. There has been a primary that started off with what felt like 595 people and has been whittled down to what everybody kind of felt like probably were going to end up being the 2 ultimate choices at the end. There are a lot of people that are not happy with the result, and I understand. I really understand. But what we want to do here is kind of get people to take a step back because, and again, Twitter isn't the world. We are, trust us, we are aware of that. But I think there's a lot of people who are upset and angry, and they're channeling that anger in the wrong place. And I'm not trying to be the person to tell you what to do with your emotions, but I do through this want to provide a perspective that now at 30, 31, I didn't have at 23, 24, and to kind of serve as sort of I don't want to say guide. I don't want to think of myself as this so super important person, but to provide a voice in a different way that's not Chris Matthews on MSNBC or Rachel Maddow, which no offense to them, but those are voices we're used to hearing. So I want to put a black voice behind it for one, but I also want to put a younger voice that maybe you haven't heard from with these things. I don't know. So let's talk a little bit about the focus of today's episode is on Joe Biden. It's on his campaign. It's on his platform. It's on how we got here. I want to talk about, we're going to start, Ron, first with a little bit of the Democratic primary. As I mentioned before, there were, 10 to the nth power of candidates when this thing first got started. It was like the 2004 California governor race. It was like everybody was on the table.
It was crazy.
So, when this all first got started, Ron, when we were starting this primary about a year ago, who were the names that jumped out to you that you thought were going to be contenders, and who were you really putting your weight behind?
Okay, so instantly I had 3 names in mind. First, Beto O'Rourke. What he showed me in that race in Texas, I was like, this guy really has Bobby Kennedy qualities. And I know people say he's all, just hand movements and just bravado, but I do think he's a character who is unafraid to speak out on issues that affect primarily Black and brown people. He's a true ally without trying to, you know, wear the burden on his back and be all like woe is me or whatever. So yeah, I really thought he would be the next rising star of the Democratic Party. Obviously that didn't work out. My second name, and we could get into this later, this may be another episode entirely, but
Mm.
but Kamala, and I know she has a checkered past, to put it lightly, but at the same time, what she's done with her Senate appointment in such a short time shows that she's effective. Um, for better or worse, she's a great prosecutor. So I do think that, yeah, for like I said, for better or worse, like I said, that's another episode entirely. But I do think in her short time in the Senate, she was very effective, and she was a face that people got to know and like, okay, I know that person instantly. Like it's crazy that she's a household name, in such short amount of time. My third, I kind of knew she didn't have a chance in hell from the jump, but I've always liked her, even though she had like a major gaffe a few years ago. If you remember the thing with the and by the way, I'm talking about Elizabeth Warren. The
Mm.
thing with her saying like, okay, I'm a member of this tribe, and the tribe being like, yeah, you're like a grad chapter member. We don't know you. So basically, Elizabeth Warren, I think she was someone who had the acumen for the job and had great planning and policies because basically a platform is cool, but I want to know your plans. And to me, she had the best plans and policies. And ultimately, I mean, I could share this now. That's who I voted for in the primaries.
Yeah, I was the same way. Of course, we didn't get to primaries by the time Liz pulled out. But I was
Yeah.
I was a huge like staunchly in the corner of Liz. Let's go. Like I was waiting on her to announce her candidacy. I was wanting her to run in 2016, even though I understood why she didn't.
Mhm.
But I was waiting. She was one of the ones that I was waiting for. Um, as far as candidates that actually kind of popped up that I was not expecting, that I ended up really invested in and actually wanted to learn more about. Of course, Kamala, I was going to support the Black candidates to an extent.
To an extent.
I wasn't going to propel them above my choice,
Mhm.
but I was interested in seeing what Kamala or Cory Booker could do. I really loved Julian Castro as he came along in there. But the big one for me that really got like me be paying attention was Jay Inslee. And he had no shot in hell, but it was there are people that when they come to the stage, their entire purpose is to move the needle a little bit. And we'll get into this later with Bernie Sanders. I fully believe that Bernie's entire role in these last 4 years has been to move the conversation in a direction that it has not previously been. And we can discuss whether or not he's the right vessel to carry it forward. But
Mhm.
his voice is as important as anybody else's. Jay Inslee for me was that on climate change, because a lot of people talked about climate change, but Jay Inslee at the first debate was like, no, here's my plan. Here's how it's going to work. We are going to actually utilize or reverse a lot of the things that have harmed Black people through, climate action, climate inaction, environmental racism, and we are going to make a new climate plan that works for these communities that have been left behind. That got my attention. When he dropped out and people like Elizabeth Warren picked up that plan, that's when I was like, okay, this is who I really like. And honestly, if Biden, and we'll get to this later, if Biden had not committed to a woman being his VP, I honestly believe Inslee would have been one of those top candidates
Right.
to be out there. But I think it really was an interesting primary in the fact that everybody except for like Marianne Williamson and Tulsi Gabbard brought something to the table that was worth conversing about. And I really don't want to hear it about Tulsi. Like
Just know.
just know I am.
Like I was willing to hear just from everybody on that stage, with the exception of Tulsi. Like
Tulsi.
like Marianne, like I would still listen to you even though I'm like, but with Tulsi, just no.
Marianne is a complete loon, but she had the most concrete and concise argument about reparations of anybody.
I mean,
A broken clock is right twice a day. But that blew my mind during that debate when she just got up there and was like, yeah, here's blah, blah, blah. This is why, and this is why, blah, blah. And I was like, wait, Marianne, did you just say something coherent? And then I found out she's anti-vaxxer. And it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and then there were people during the race that really got my attention, like Tom Steyer. He had no chance in hell. But again, there are people that I think are there to move the needle. And he was one of the more adamant people about environmental racism, about, climate change. So I think from this primary, what really happened and what I kind of want to get to here about why people are so upset. Look, Bernie led early, right? When the primary started hitting off, Bernie and Pete tied in Iowa. And then, Bernie wins New Hampshire.
But did they really tie in Iowa? Who knows? No,
we don't know.
I'm joking.
We really don't know.
We seriously don't know, but
we don't know. But but say Bernie won it, right? So Bernie wins Iowa. He wins New Hampshire. He wins Nevada. It looks like he's going to cruise. By this time, I think it's him, it's Elizabeth, it's Biden, and it's Pete and Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. And Steyer. And so before South Carolina, Steyer pulls out. Or I think he pulled out after South Carolina.
Yeah, I think he pulled out around that time. Yeah.
We knew after those first couple of primaries that, hey, Biden's strength is going to be in the South. It's going to be where Black voters are. It's going to be with a contingency that has been the base of the Democratic Party forever. And it looked like Biden was not going to make it. But as soon as we got to South Carolina and
yes.
For y'all that can't see it, I'm pointing at my hand.
Yes.
As soon as we got to South Carolina and Black folks got to vote, Bernie wasn't getting those votes.
No.
And I think the assumption was that Bernie had momentum because he started to expand his coalition. That's what we assumed. We assumed that Bernie was able to get people that the others could not, or was able to get people that he could not get in 2016. That's what we thought. Pete, for all his moderate isms that he portrayed, I felt like if they were going to go moderate, Pete was going to be the guy, and I was dreading it. I was like, please, dear God, I would take salad comb Amy. No, I won't.
No,
I would take Biden over the sewer. So out of the moderates, I got what I wanted. But anyway, I'm digressing here. But my main point is, and I'm sorry, Ron, I'll divert it to you here. A lot of people are upset at what happened after South Carolina, and they are pushing it to some conspiracy within the party to get their nominee by quote unquote making Amy and Pete drop out. Do you see it that way?
Okay, so I guess I have to take this question back a bit, because to me, I know the main argument from the Bernie contingency is basically, well, why won't the Black voters give him a chance? And much to the Black voters' detriment, I mean, they do play it safe, especially like a lot of the older Black voters. But at the same time, you have to ask the question, why don't older Black voters trust, insert candidate's name here? And I think those questions were never asked. I think Bernie round two, like with the force he came through with, like I really thought it was going to be much closer than it ended up being. But at the same time, I don't think he did much to reach those older Black voters. And like I said, you have to ask those questions as to why they don't trust this guy. Because let's take it all the way back to Barack Obama. A lot of people don't remember, like it was Hillary's time. Also on that stage was Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, people who were known names. But Obama basically had a grassroots movement and went to these small places and reached people in a way that I don't feel Bernie does. Like Bernie did reach like a younger contingency, but I don't think he reached the old Black voters like a Barack could. Now, do I think it's a conspiracy? No, because basically after 2016, the rules were changed with the Democratic primary. So Bernie had his fair shot, and unfortunately, he didn't win. But
and who advocated for those?
Who advocated for those changes? So I don't think you could really cry conspiracy the second time around when you advocated for those changes. So the game is the game, as they say.
And my thing along those lines is that there was a consistency about Bernie, right? He was always polling between 25 and about 32%.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine when there's four people in the race.
Mm-hmm.
But when there's two people in the race and everybody else is saying, you're not my second choice, I think it speaks to the candidate themselves about why that may be. Now, you can sit up here and say, you could make the logical argument that the country is scared of the idea of socialism because of the way that it has been portrayed to us throughout the years. Okay. The argument itself may be correct, even if people are wrong for thinking that way, but that's still the way that they're thinking. Or you can say, Biden has more name recognition within that community. They trust him more, as you were saying, than they do Bernie, because yes, Bernie, I've heard the argument made. Yeah, Bernie marched civil rights movement. That's great. He went to Vermont and was up in the Northeast doing his thing for who knows how long before now he's wanting to run for president. And so people haven't seen him. This group that they're wanting to attribute to, or that they're wanting to tie him to, hasn't seen him. So he could have done all those things. That's great. But if in their mind frame he disappeared for 30 or 40 years, then what? That just kind of says that you're trying to come in and buy my vote. So
it's interjection here.
Yeah.
This is an America has finally come full circle on this lunacy type thing. When our man John Lewis basically gave his endorsement to Biden, people were saying, but Bernie marched with MLK. And I was like, I have no words, because John Lewis was front and center getting, his head busted open. So I feel like, and once again, you have to ask that question: why is someone who was there front and center, an older black voter like John Lewis
or Jim Clyburn,
exactly, why are they more so leaning this way than that way? And I think you have a point here in our notes that we'll get to later as to why that may be the case.
Well, let's kind of move to the next subject here, because we're kind of blending into it. I mentioned a little bit earlier how important it is for people to have their voices on stage, and how Bernie's impact will be felt for a long, long time, and hopefully will be the future if we don't drop the ball here. Even if Bernie is not elected president, or even now that Bernie has not been given the nomination, his influence from 2016 is heavy. Now that Biden is officially getting the nomination, I believe he is going to have the most progressive platform of any nominee in the Democratic in the history of the Democratic Party. And we'll go over that in just a second. But speaking of Bernie specifically, from 2016 to now, what does it mean for him in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party now that he is not getting the nomination and it kind of seems to be the end of the road?
Well, to me, I think sometimes people don't remember like how the movement started. They remember the maybe like the loudest voice of the movement, or the one who came further down the road. So to me, I do think Bernie did something very important in 2016. Like and I don't think Hillary gets a lot of credit for this, but at the Democratic National Convention, Bernie made a speech and said, and he held up the Democratic platform. It was like, a lot of things we wanted are in here. Hillary is doing this. Like, he said that. So he was able to force these issues into conversation. Now, although he is now the face of this movement, I don't think the movement is his anymore. He's passing the torch. So it's going to be the AOCs of the world. It's going to be, it's basically everybody in the squad. They're going to be the ones to carry out this message. So although he's the mouth of the movement, I don't think he's going to be the one to push it forward. And by the way, this isn't me being a moderate and saying, like, now isn't the time to change. Now is totally the time for the change, but I just don't think he was the right one to carry out that message.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think sometimes I was referring to something else entirely the other day, but I tweeted out that sometimes the message can be right, but the messenger isn't.
Exactly.
And that's nothing against Bernie. It just may be that people don't want to hear it from You know what I'm saying? Like,
Exactly.
you can tell somebody until you're blue in the face that, hey, you got high cholesterol in your family. Maybe you shouldn't eat fries all the time. But if you're if the way you are coming about it doesn't sit right with the person that you're communicating with, for whatever reason, your intentions can be great. You could be using a very calm and assuring voice. But if they don't like that you're the one saying it, they're not going to receive it. And so it doesn't matter what you do. Now the ideas are out there. And as I mentioned before with Joe's platform, there are things on here that we wouldn't have imagined from a Democratic candidate. Barack Obama didn't run on these things. He wants to abolish the death penalty. He wants to end cash bail reform. He wants to eliminate private prisons entirely. Minimum wage support going to $15 an hour. Mandatory or I want to say wants paid family and sick leave, but he hasn't necessarily stuck the landing on exactly the extent he wants to do. He wants to study reparations, which doesn't go as far as some people like Steyer and Williamson were talking about. He's against for-profit charter schools. He initially said he wants 2 years of community college, but is now, or 2 years of free community college, but is now on board for free college altogether. He wants to end or fix student debt programs, to double teacher pay. All these different things, support nuclear power, have an aggressive climate change plan, which, by the way, he adopted Jay Inslee in Elizabeth Warren's climate change plan. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times people get stuck on the idea of Joe Biden 2008 to 2016, and not the idea that what you are voting for is not necessarily just Joe Biden. You're voting for a platform. You're voting
I was just about to say that, because, and sorry to cut you off here.
No, you're good.
Okay, so this is how I view it. Imagine a presidency in which Joe Biden is, of course, the president. Underneath him, you have a female VP, whether it's Big Gretch. Sorry, I had
it's
to say
Big Gretch.
Yeah, whether it's Big Gretch, Stacey Abrams. I'm not going to say Liz, because I think Liz has an important role, maybe Senate Majority Leader. And then you have a cabinet of Kamala, Cory Booker, and then the Castros. Just think about that. That is such a diverse and strong cabinet. So no, it isn't just about the president. It's about the people he surrounds himself with. And as you see right now, if you're surrounded by a bunch of idiots, then yeah, the president doesn't matter. The president isn't going to know everything. So when he has to defer and ask his cabinet, hey, what do you think on this issue? You want strong people in the room. And regardless of what you may think about those candidates or the reasons you didn't vote for them, they will be great cabinet members. So I think the team that Joe is going to assemble is going to be so strong, and it's going to be like one of the strongest cabinets we've seen in a long time.
I'm going to keep the sports references limited, but if you want, a simile, look at what Tampa Bay is doing with Tom Brady.
Yes.
Nobody thinks that Tom Brady can win it all for them anymore. We don't think that Joe Biden is necessarily the strongest candidate out there, but damn, man, they're surrounding Brady with all of the talent. And so if Joe Biden is able to get out there and takes Big Gretch, or Tammy Duckworth, which I swear to God, I'd be so happy if he picks Tammy Duckworth, or Elizabeth Warren, or whoever he picks. We know that he's going to pick a strong woman to be the vice presidential candidate who will mop the floor with Pence on a debate, which is really the only thing I'm looking forward to from that.
Yes.
But he picks a strong VP. It's an indicator of going to be, what's going to be a strong cabinet. Bernie probably is in that cabinet in somehow, some way, or has influence on that cabinet. So it's all about, all of these things have led up to, no, we didn't get the candidate that a lot of younger people wanted. So younger people were largely split between Bernie and Elizabeth. That's okay. We're getting somebody who is easily saying, yes, I'm going to take on these platforms. I'm going to be a representative of the party. We're going to get to the allegations in just a second, I promise. But I'm going to be this platform. This is what I'm running on. Right. And that's what it should be about. I think we've gotten too far down the road of, I don't want to say, do I like this person or would I have a beer with this person? But it's kind of the W election idea that kind of kept going and going and going. And I'm not expecting a presidential candidate to be perfect. And again, this is aside from allegations. We're going to get to that. But I'm not expecting a presidential candidate to be everything I want them to be. What platform are you adopting?
I feel like you're in my hair right now, because that's what I've been saying for the longest. I think to have Barack Obama and then a Donald Trump, both polarizing figures on opposite ends of the spectrum, people want that president that that basically they could look at him like, you know what, I feel like I know this guy, or I could have a drink with this guy. Um, Trump, same way with Reagan back in the day. Like there are so many people who remember when Reagan came to Tuscaloosa, and they love Reagan because of that, because they could reach out and feel him. Same with Obama. Obama was accessible to us in a way that no other president has been before. So they want that president that they feel like they know. I could not care less about that. I voted for Hillary in 2016. I would not have a beer with Hillary, but I feel like when you put resumes on the table, she was the best person for the job at the time. And that's what I want from my president. Like, hey, I may not like my boss, but if my boss does his or hers work, like I respect it. And I want to give you my respect. I don't care to like you. Like that's not important. So that's what it is for me.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Let's transition here to talking a little bit about the possible VP picks. It's been a little bit different since, of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so the whole vetting process kind of seems to be public. But let's talk a little bit about the candidates that are on the table currently for Biden. Now, back during one of the final, it might have actually been the final Democratic primary debate between Biden and Bernie. Biden made the commitment to selecting a woman as his vice presidential pick, and we've kind of gone so far down the line now that I don't think he's going to back off on that at all.
No.
For one, that would be almost a death bullet. But we're at the point now where several names have been thrown out. Gretchen Wilson, Big Gretch, has been one of the names that it's kind of caught fire recently. You've also got people like, of course, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Kamala Harris. Oh gosh, my brain is escaping me. The senator from Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin. Tammy Baldwin has been on the list.
Baldwin, right.
As well as Tammy Duckworth. And then I think some of the other surprising ones were like Michelle LaWan Gresham, who's the governor of New Mexico. So there's a lot of people on the table, down to Stacey Abrams, even the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. Please don't take Keisha from us, but Keisha Lance Bottoms has actually even been thrown around as a possible pick. Ron, a lot of polls show that vice presidential picks don't matter unless they're bad. What is the worst thing that Biden can do here aside from going back on his promise and picking a man? And then number two, who would you like to see and why?
I'm glad you threw out that little stat, because I think Hillary, and God bless him because I like this guy, chose the worst possible VP ever. So you basically have to, much like Joe was, you basically have to have that VP who who am I trying to say, may not be the lead singer of the band, but the
It's
person
not Tim
who
Kaine.
Right. Just like Tim Kaine. You're not the lead singer of the band, but people like seeing you. Like there's a certain faction of people who like seeing this person. Like you're the JC Chauvet of the boy band, basically.
Right. Like,
So
hold on. So before you dive deep into that, because I find it absolutely hilarious that two of like the last three presidential candidates, or two of three in the last three elections have picked like truly awful VPs. Like McCain lost the election from picking Sarah Palin once people got to know who Sarah Palin was. And I'm thoroughly convinced that if Hillary would have knocked the VP pick out of the park, then all the other stuff that came around wouldn't have mattered as much. But because nobody knew who the hell Tim Kaine was, I don't even think people from Virginia knew who Tim Kaine was. That's how bad of a pick that
it was
was.
bad.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And see, I forgot your second question. What was your second question?
I forgot my second question. No, my second question was, who would you like to see end up with the VP acknowledgement?
Okay. Personally, I would love to see Stacey Abrams, but at this point in time, I'm almost like, protect Stacey Abrams. Let's not tarnish her good name, because she's going to go on and do great things. So if Biden loses and Stacey's our VP, then that's kind of a knock on her record. Like, oh, she's going to be viewed as a loser regardless now. So I do think, I do think Tammy Duckworth would be a great choice. And I think let's just say it. I feel like there are people in this country who like Joe because Joe looks like them, and those people have a great appreciation for the military. Tammy Duckworth is is a badass veteran. Tammy Duckworth is an amazing person. And not saying you choose her simply for that. You choose her because she's just a badass person. But I do think Tammy Duckworth would be a great VP.
Yeah, we're on the same page. That is part of the reason why I think she would be a slam dunk choice. Because I'm with you. I would love to see Elizabeth Warren in that slot. If there were no consequences for it, right? Like, I would love to see Elizabeth Warren. However, we need her in the Senate. We're trying to flip the Senate. We are also looking at, if we flip the Senate, then again, as you mentioned earlier, she could be the Senate Majority Leader, which would be absolutely huge. So I don't know if it's right to have her. I love Stacey, but I'd rather again have Stacey be back home in 2022 because Kemp's reelection is looking less and less likely, and she could entirely run on a platform of, see, I told you.
See, I told you.
Yeah. And we could right the wrong that was 2018. So in that case, I think Big Gretch is a hot name right now. I don't see her with what's going on right now being probably comfortable with stepping away from her role as governor to campaign as VP with everything that she's done for Michigan. And I don't think that she'll move the needles in the polls the way that they may want her to. Again, Kamala is somebody who I think I'm just looking at the dream scenario of her on stage with Mike Pence.
That would be brutal.
It would be a massacre, but in the long run of decision making, I think a new face matters, and I think a new face where we can tell their story and about who they are, that can really impact that voting group. Again, I know, and shout out to Hagan. He's one that hounds on the idea of pushing and trying to pursue moderates. But man, Romney Clinton voters exist and Obama Trump voters exist.
Right.
And I know it's weird because there's no way in hell I would have voted for Donald Trump, and there's no way I would have voted for Mitt Romney. But those people exist, and we can't act like they don't. So we do need to get those people in some way if we know that they're going to try every trick in the book to suppress the other votes that we can't fix right now, right? Like, we're fighting to get mail-in voting so that more Black people, more Hispanic people can vote. Texas has closed several hundred voting precincts in mostly Latin areas because they know they go blue. So if you can also say, okay, we're going to fight to fix this, but then we're going to also try and get these people, then Tammy Duckworth, who is a pretty progressive candidate, who is also a decorated war hero and badass, and more than half the people that would be voting for her, it's a slam dunk to me.
Yeah. Like the more I think about it, you really can't think of a better alternative. Like it's perfect. And I think with the team that Biden currently has, I'm almost inclined to believe they would say like, hey, you need this VP to be a minority, basically, in some way, shape, or form.
It's weird because it's like you need a minority, but not too Black.
Yeah, but not exactly. So that's why, as you said, like Keisha Lance Bottoms, that would excite some people in the country.
I would love it.
I would love it.
I would love Keisha.
But there are some people who not so much.
They're gonna check out because it's that Keisha and it's Lance Bottoms. You know what I'm saying? So
Keisha,
like,
fried chicken on Instagram
and cornbread on Instagram. So it's like, I love Keisha, and I think there are things that, and I want to be careful when I say this, because when I say this, I'm not saying this to say it's not time yet or it's too early, because I don't want to put that misnomer or that stigma on Black women. And so what I do want to say is I think there are better roles for them where they can do better for the greater good. For Stacey Abrams, that role is being here in Georgia, because 2022, I don't see any way that Georgia's Democratic Party looks at anybody else but Stacey if she's not VP. Keisha has done a pretty solid job in Atlanta, and she's viewed favorably. I don't think she has the national spotlight yet, or would be able to be that slam dunk that Tammy could be. So, I think Tammy, to me, is just the best possible pick. And I agree with you. There's maybe one or two others where I'd be like, you know what? I love it. And then there's somewhere I'd be like, okay, it can grow on me. There's only like two that I absolutely hate. Klobuchar and...
Just know, like, Klobuchar is like sentient, like cold potato salad. So let's not even have. And And every time, okay, so every time we would move to like other states who would vote in the primary, I would like just lean back and be like, Klobuchar still in this?
Like, why? Who was voting?
It's like, who's voting for Amy
Like,
Klobuchar?
there's so many other alternatives, and I really feel like, and this is petty and outside of the the realm of politics, but I kind of feel like the salad and comb thing should have really done her in, like that should have been it. And so I I
Right.
I don't like, I just kind of, I don't know, but
I don't
she's the
know.
only
Yeah.
one where I'm like, Joe, please, dear God, no,
Just no. Just
don't do it.
no.
You can
Just
literally
no.
pick anybody else except for Tulsi, and it would be okay. But just don't do that. Like, just don't, just not her, please.
Please.
Um, okay, so we talked a little bit about why some choices would be better than others. We talked about why we'd rather have Warren in the Senate, and part of that is because what's at stake here with this election. We've talked about, Ron, the ability to possibly flip the Senate. I think we need 7 seats. I think that's the
Yeah.
count.
Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah.
So 7 seats are necessary in order to flip the Senate. I think that includes more than likely losing Alabama. Um,
Mm,
sadly, God,
yeah.
Jesus
Man,
Christ.
thank you for your service, Doug.
Yeah, thank you,
Your
Doug.
2 years. Yeah.
We appreciate it. But so let's talk a little bit about what's at stake in this election. Ron, it was shared the other day through the very unstable commander in chief's Twitter account that he has appointed 252 federal judges. Ron, along with that, what else is at stake here in
Um,
2020?
as you may have heard, RBG, and she should be okay in 2 or 3 days, but she was just in the hospital again, and she is 87. So you have a very vital Supreme Court seat. You have those judges, as you mentioned, and then you have basically a maniacal, AG currently. So these things are currently at stake. It's not just the presidency, it's the people the president appoints. So we already gave up a crucial Supreme Court seat with, I mean, that thing still blows my mind. Like, I can't believe that happened. Yeah, so you have a vital Supreme Court seat, you have these judges, and you have a cabinet who, would basically uphold the Constitution. That's everything that's at stake. So I know you look at that presidential candidate and you're like, they're not really my cup of tea, but you have to have faith that this person will appoint people better than we currently have. Like, that's what's at stake. That's what I'm voting for.
Like, Brett Kavanaugh has no business on the
No,
Supreme
no
Court.
business at all.
Neil Gorsuch has no business on the, in terms of the circumstance, has no, he may be a qualified judge, whatever. I don't know much about his background, but that seat was stolen. And Mitch McConnell made no bones about telling us that it was stolen. When asked if a seat comes open this year, would he halt everything like he did in 2016, saying we should let the people decide? He said no. So, I think it's just, we know the game that they're playing, and we can't kind of get sucked into that. Along with RBG, the notorious RBG, Stephen Breyer is 81 years old. So you have the possibility of, if we lose this election, getting a Supreme Court that, instead of being 5-4, is 7-2.
And you do not want that.
Good luck with any progressive platforms coming in anytime soon if we're at a 7-2 disadvantage. Because, or if they do go through, Alabama or Mississippi challenging them all the way up to the Supreme Court to where...
Yeah, I was just about to say, just imagine all your civil liberties now going up to a Supreme Court that's 7-2, the conservative side.
With 3 Brett Kavanaughs.
Right.
So, right. I mean, again, like, I understand it. Joe Biden is not inspiring. Joe Biden has, right now, sexual assault allegations against him, and I get it. All right, and yep, I'm not going to sit up here. I'm not going to tell anybody that's a survivor of trauma or assault that their ideas and views don't matter, because that is not fair. And everything that Tara Reid is saying needs to be heard and needs to be listened to. All that needs to be heard out. I totally get it. Where we are right now, Biden is the nominee. He has even stated, without outright saying it, that he's doing this for 4 years. He is here to interrupt the flow, to stop Trump, to get as many people as possible to not vote for Trump. And this VP pick is basically going to be the person that the party is throwing out in 2024. That has been hinted at over and over again. So again, if you hate Biden, I get it.
And
Trump,
I'm glad
go
you
ahead.
mentioned that, because to me it's about rhythm. Basically, we have a Republican president. We're in a deficit, and there's a sea change, and we have a Democratic president, and we slowly move out of that deficit. Sometimes even like towards a surplus, like for instance with Clinton.
Mhm.
So basically, I feel like in 2016 we were in prime position to take what Barack wanted to do a step further. And I always mention this because I feel like this is lost, but his final executive order signed was that within 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, private prisons had to close within 5 years. They had to be phased out. Of course, that was undone when Trump was elected. But I feel like if we would have had two Democratic presidents in a row, then so much more would have been done. So it's about rhythm. So like you said, inserting Biden here disrupts that rhythm of the course we're currently on, because we are on a terrible course, and it's all about disrupting that rhythm. Like I know people want to totally shift the scale to the left, but right now just disrupt the flow. Like that's what we gotta do.
You can't pull a semi truck. You can't completely stop a semi truck and throw it back the other way. I don't know how else to put that to people. Like, I get it, man. In my most progressive dreams, you're talking about college being free. You're talking about the erasure of student loan debt. You're talking about, free healthcare. You're talking about, and yes, I understand all these things come with the price of taxes. I get it. I'm totally fine with that. I'm fine with paying more taxes to ensure that the greater good is taken care of. All these things. I want all of those progressive platforms, all of that stuff. I also understand what this country is. And I think that's the main problem with what we're seeing with a lot of the Bernie bros, a lot of this kind of liberal left, this really progressive side of things. I'm going to go on a tangent here and a little bit of a rant, and I apologize in advance. I'm trying not to
take the floor. Go ahead.
I'm trying not to shoot anybody in saying this, but I'm just really annoyed and tired, right? Number one, the comparison of saying that, trying to compare the progressive movement to the civil rights movement in terms of the amount of fight that you're putting behind it is absolutely bullshit. Okay? The people that marched in the civil rights movement, the people that were involved with everything that led up to, Selma, that led up to the Freedom Riders, all of that stuff were years, decades, centuries of fighting in between. 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I understand people have held political positions for longer. I get it. I totally get it. A lot of people in this movement have been paying attention for 4 to 8 years because they're mostly our age, lower 30s, late 20s, and they are passionate, and that's great. But man, it takes more than 4 years to get it done. Okay, and this country just is not. I think as Black people, we see it more for what it is because we're used to being involved in the system, and a lot of people now are kind of realizing that, oh wait,
this isn't my America. What?
Yeah, like this isn't what I was.
But Black
about.
people are like, yeah,
like this is what it is, Bubba. Like
yeah.
I think that's been my thing. And so what I'm trying to explain to people is, no, we didn't go from a 0 on the progressive scale to a 10 like y'all wanted to. But as a matter of fact, we're like in the negative 50s right now with the way things are going. So what we're trying to do is get most of the country on board to say, this is not working. We need to stop this. We need to get somebody in there to start moving back this way, right? And then once Biden leaves in 2024, because if Duckworth is your VP and becomes your presidential candidate and ends up winning the presidency, you're getting more progressive views. As those other justices age out, because there's a couple of Republican justices that by the end of 2032 will be out of here, or like maybe retire or may not be alive anymore. But the point is that you have in that time frame the chance to right the ship. If anything, it should be more appealing that we're looking at a 12-year run possibly if we do this right and get behind what this is. Yes, the person that we are putting in there for the first 4 years you may not like. The person who we were putting there in the first 4 years is not the progressive champion that Bernie was. However, he's taken on a lot of those ideas. He's not going to fight against them. Stop using the damn exaggerated idea that people are going to die because Joe doesn't want Medicare for all right now. They have both said numerous times that they both want the same thing and have different ideas on how to get there. What's important is under both of their plans, everybody has a chance for coverage. Everybody will be able to be covered and be able to afford their health care. That is the first goal.
And let me raise a question to you. I mean, Joe was right there when Barack was getting pushback for not well, I won't even say pushback, but so the discussion of like mandating states to expand Medicaid came up, and basically Barack was called a tyrant for not doing that. And I feel like that's one of his greatest like regrets. Like, okay, maybe I should have pushed harder on this and not left it up to the states. Maybe that should have been rolled into the American care. So I feel like Joe was there when it happened. So it's not so far-fetched to me to believe that he wants to continue basically Medicare for all and the American Care Act, and he wants to add improvements that he couldn't, back then. Like he was there as it was all unrolling. So like I said, it's not so far-fetched to me to believe he wants to carry on those ideas. Like I don't think we're going to revert back to things used to be. I think
that's the most ridiculous thing though,
exactly
to me, is that this is somebody who was helping build the Affordable Care Act that got us away from what we were in 2008. Because of what Trump tried to do in 2016 and 17, we almost lost all of that. And what we're asking here is somebody to build upon that, whether it's Bernie's idea or Joe's idea. But the important part of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act was to ensure that everybody could have health insurance, could have health care at an affordable rate. It's in the damn name. So no, it's not Medicare for all. I get it. But you also have to understand that most of this country has a negative idea of what Medicare is because of what it currently is in our country. It's not beefed up in a way to where, it looks like what Canada and Europe has. There are certain luxuries in the private healthcare system that they don't get overseas that people are used to, that they may not want to go away. People are just now getting the idea that, hey, maybe your health insurance being tied directly to your employment is not a good idea. That's now starting to gain steam, but it wasn't there until we had a literal pandemic for people to get that idea. So I just want people to, understand where you're coming from, but also understand where the country is, and that you, by yelling into Twitter or yelling into a mirror or shouting at people, aren't going to instantly change their mind. It's going to take time. And if we got 12 years to do it, which we're about to have, I don't know what to tell you.
And that's all there is to it. And I guess my tangent would be, this is slightly unrelated, but at the same time it's related. What's been disheartening to me this entire time is basically what I call liberal racism. There are people who want a progressive movement, but they want it their way. And like I said, it goes back to the thing as to why older Black voters don't trust certain people. But you have to remember, Martin Luther King himself was a socialist. He was a socialist. Like most people think he died for civil rights, when in fact he died while asking for better pay for sanitation workers. So he was a socialist. So I don't think Black people are inherently opposed to socialism. I just think you have to find a way to reach them. So like you said, like screaming out these extremes aren't helping people, or are acting like you know more than people, or you're holier than thou. I do think we need to just, basically, pull back the veil, show our true faces, and just have a real conversation as to what's going on and how do we reach people, how do we help people. Because if I come in your house, kick in your door, be like, okay, you're living life wrong, I'm going to show you how you should live life. Are you going to listen to me, or are you going to be like, get the hell out of my house? So basically, in order to help people, they have to trust you. They have to see you doing the work. So this progressive movement that's happening, cool, I get it. Like it needs to happen, but we have to find a better way to reach people. Because I mean, I haven't stated this yet, but as you should probably tell, like I classify myself as a socialist too, because I do think things should be for the greater good. Okay, how do we do that? Do you do it by telling people what you think they should do, or just, truly trying to help people? So I do think the language and the tone needs to change. The message is cool, but it's just the approach. I
Yeah.
think that's the issue.
I mean, I think you also made a good point that I've been trying to harp on too for people is that um, black folks in the country, especially older black people, may not be so apt for a complete overhaul of the system because they may feel like they're still going to get left behind. And I think that's a major thing that people aren't considering is they're saying you need to do this because it'd be better for our country. Okay, but when we've always heard better for our country, it hasn't involved us. And so what I try and tell people is that, how do we ensure that even if we implement, Medicare for all, that black people aren't dying disproportionately in our healthcare system? And it's kind of two different arguments, but it's still something that concerns people. And that's my main point is that if we were to wave a magic wand today and say, all right, we're going by, the economic system that is dictated by socialism, how many of us believe that there still would be some economic disparity between white and black? It's going to be there. And a lot of it is just so entrenched in history that we have to step by step undo that history. It's like you created a huge knot, and cutting the knot may be a solution here, but it may come out all funky. You may fray the wires, all that kind of stuff, when there's a way to slowly undo what has been created and built. Again, I'm kind of diving into my academic side here, but everything ties back to slavery and history. It's because of slavery. It's because of the economic disparity. It's because of these things that we have inadequate education systems. It's because of those things that we have inadequate access to higher education. It's because of an inadequate access to higher education that requires more loan payments that we end up with, with fewer, cash on hand, lower cash on hand, lower equity. We're not able to buy the same houses. Historically, we haven't been able to. We've been redlined in the neighborhoods that have no equity. So you have already a built-in, there's already a built-in gap, and just switching to socialism doesn't fix the gap.
Exactly. Oh, go ahead. Finish your statement. Okay. I was going to say that's why Elizabeth Warren was my ideal candidate, because she wasn't preaching Medicare for all. She wasn't preaching equality. She was preaching equity. She was saying reparations, in my mind, is black people having access to trade programs, community college, black people not having to carry the burden of student loans, especially if they're still a first generation and they have to take care of their families. Like, she said stuff like this. She brought out the mortality rates for black women. She was like, we need to do more for these people so we can bring them to level with the rest of the country. So to me, that's why she was the ideal candidate, because she identified those problems and she said, this is how we fix it. So yeah, as a black person living in Maringo County, Alabama, and you hear, Medicare for all, free college for all, you're like, well, shit. Excuse me, we were supposed to make this a family podcast, but I let it slip. But yeah, you hear free college for all, and you're like, well, and this is what I hear back home. You're like, well, those white folks don't want me at their college, so what does that do for me? So
even worse, actually free 4-year college for all, which again, this is not my higher education stuff, but free college for all actually benefits white middle class people than it does black people. But go ahead, I'm sorry, continue.
But no, that's just my point. I think you just have to identify, and that's how you reach those people. You identify the problems that ail them, and you say, okay, this is how we fix them. So to me, that's why I say Warren and Bernie were like basically two sides of the same coin, but the way Warren broke her plans down and the way and the way she thought through things appealed to me more. So that's why I voted for her.
All right. So last thing before we get out of here, the nutcase in the White House seems to be, if you can't tell by now, we don't care for Trump. Nutcase in the White House seems to be really on the fritz. His handling of the coronavirus, of COVID-19, has been abysmal, to say the least. He has ignored it at every turn and has directly crashed the economy while trying not to crash the economy, which is like, bravo for pulling that off, because you've really got to be bad to try your hardest to fix something and break it further. So there are all kinds of, and understandably, people are cynical of polls right now, polling data. There's all kind of information out there that's showing that people are just fed up with Trump. And there's all kind of electoral data that's based on states that shows that Trump is extremely vulnerable, if not in position for one of the worst wipeouts we've seen since Reagan over Mondale. Ron, do you believe this? I'm not asking you for your cynical side because I'm cynical too, but do you believe that Trump is actually vulnerable? And where do you think things head if we stay on this course going into November?
To answer this question, I do need to briefly pull out the cynical side and just answer that really quick.
Go ahead.
First off, I do think we still have, and this isn't me tinfoil hat, we still have the looming threat of interference, both domestic and abroad. So just want to keep that in mind. But keeping all variables constant, I do think you still have those extreme Trump voters, but I do think those people who were on the fence who voted for Trump just because he maybe felt familiar or they didn't like Hillary, because there are people who voted for Trump simply because they didn't like Hillary. So I do think those people are like, you know what, I could get behind a Joe Biden. And plus the numbers show that for some reason people I just identified with Joe Biden. And I feel like those people who came out in droves and voted for Joe Biden would vote for Biden over Trump. I don't. I do think, like I said, if we lived in a perfect world, I do think Joe Biden would like knock this out the park, and it'd be like real scary because we have to remember Hillary still won the popular vote, so it's not unimaginable that Biden will win. But I do think it would get scary for Trump if all variables were constant, but who knows?
Like if Trump were to lose Texas and Georgia, that would be absolutely glorious. Which is polling data that shows that there is a possibility. Now, I'm not holding my breath, but it's apparently like, I think Joe's within 3 points in Texas, and within Georgia, it's neck and neck, like 2 points apart. So the possibility is there, and I would absolutely love it if that happened. But I'm with you in the sense that I am kind of cynical. I believe it when I see it. I think there's enough time for him to just do the absolute minimum to where things kind of start recovering on their own and people contribute it to him, simply because the messaging of the Democratic Party isn't aggressive enough. We're starting to see that change. There's a brilliant ad that's being circulated now on social media and hopefully soon on television that completely flips Ronald Reagan's Morning in America on its head. And it's just, it's done by the Lincoln Project. If you haven't seen it, go to
it's
Twitter
great.
and search
Yeah.
it. It's amazing. And so, think as more of that kind of messaging comes out, if Tom Steyer and Michael Bloomberg do what they say they were going to do in terms of putting the money to back Biden, or now the nominee, in a way that would put him over the edge, then we absolutely need it. If you can get that commercial and all the commercials they've been hitting him with in the living rooms, in people's living room, and I say living room because that's kind of the audience that we need to turn out. Most of us are on like Facebook and Twitter. We're not really
you
watching.
Still need the 5 o'clock news crowd to turn out. Yeah,
you absolutely need it. And so I had a neighbor, man, this older white lady who shout out Miss Doris. She's amazing. I hope she's still doing well. But I had a neighbor that she was fearful of Bernie. And I'm not saying that, we did the right thing because she's scared of Bernie, this one person, but in the same breath talked about how she would vote for Joe over Trump because Trump is a madman. And I'm like, well, then why wouldn't you vote for?
Well, why wouldn't you vote for?
Like, why would you? But that's how people are, and so it may not make sense to us, but somehow in their mind it makes sense, and I can't change that. So we're here where we are now, and because of the candidate that we have, we do need to go ahead and try and tackle and pull some of these voters that wouldn't have voted otherwise. But I think we're in a good situation. I do.
The more I think about it, it probably was the best possible outcome. Do I like it? Not one bit. Not one bit. And for the record, I should state that if Bernie won the nomination, I would be backing Bernie right now because there's one objective, and that's getting Trump out of here. So I just so just want to throw that out there. So I think and I hate it, but where we are in this country right now, like I just want Trump out of office, and if Joe's that guy,
Biden Duckworth 2020.
I'm with it,
I
man.
need
Let's print up the shirts. Let's put it on bumper stickers. Let's go.
So that's going to do it for our first episode of this series. If you like it, enjoy it, please leave us a comment. Tweet us at the KWC blog. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching it on YouTube. But we're hopefully this is something that we're going to do for sure leading up to the election every week. Just kind of news, info, tidbits, politics, all that kind of stuff. And then, depending on the feedback we get, we'll probably continue it afterwards. We'll see. But leave your comments. Let us know. We greatly appreciate it. Ron, anything you want to get dropped before we get out of here?
Just to echo your sentiments, we definitely want to foster an environment for like discourse here. So whether you agree, disagree, like just let us know, because the only way we get through this is by talking it out. So we're not here to like tell you, what you should think or what you should do. We're honestly trying to, raise awareness and just start a convo. So just drop those comments and, we'll go from there.
We are going to start a dialogue.
I knew you would do that.
We're gonna catch y'all. We're gonna catch y'all next week. We appreciate it. Subscribe, youtube.com/KWC blog, twitter.com/KWC blog, kidswearcrowns.com. We'll see y'all next week.
You agree, disagree, like just let us know, because the only way we get through this is by talking it out. So we're not here to like tell you, what you should think or what you should do. We're honestly trying to, raise awareness and just start a convo. So just drop those comments and, we'll go from there.
We are going to start a dialogue.
I knew you would do that.
We're gonna catch y'all. We're gonna catch y'all next week. We appreciate it. Subscribe, youtube.com/KWC blog, twitter.com/KWC blog, kidswearcrowns.com. We'll see y'all next week.
thekidswearcrowns.com